Good morning. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, CreativeMornings, for having me, and thank you guys for coming out. This is pretty spectacular. I'm so pumped. I'm not really a morning person, so I'm trying to get myself really pumped up, and I'm really excited to be here. And obviously I love speaking in front of crowds. I'm an editorial cartoonist, and as Jeremy was just saying, this month's theme, is moments. And so what I do is, I deal with moments all the time. It's kind of my bread and butter. And my job as an editorial cartoonist is to capture moments and to define moments, and to make sure that I can boil something down that is happening in life into something that is a picture, representation. So really, I've got a really rare job, and I get rare opportunities. I do it almost every day, but for me, it's a rare opportunity to take something that is happening in the world, something that is affecting people, something that is, either being talked about or really impacting our world, and I get to boil that down, and I get to put my own spin on it, and I get to share it with you. So, I get to draw things like this almost on a daily basis. And, it's just fantastic. I love drawing. I don't know who that little dinosaur is with the weird thing on his head, but, little tiny hands. Never seen him, never seen it before. Just came up with that completely on my own. So, this is what I get to do every day. And quite honestly, I like having this stuff speak, more for me than, actually speaking. So I'm an editorial cartoonist. And, it's kind of a weird job to have. There aren't too many of us. And I think a lot of people really don't understand what an editorial cartoonist is. So I'm an opinion journalist. I do think of myself as a journalist first and an artist second. And what I do with my day is I read a lot of news. And I use my news gathering judgment to figure out what is the most important thing happening that day, or what is affecting me, or what could possibly be affecting you. And then I sit around and I procrastinate, and eventually I start scribbling something, and I try to come up with something that encapsulates a piece of news or a story or an event into a drawing. And hopefully what it does is it gets out and it affects at least one person. Last night, I was emailing with DJ and Jeremy, and I was just shocked that there were so many people who were going to be here today. And they said, well, I only had, I think it was 108 people who had signed up, and they reminded me that just like my cartoons, which only have to affect one person, and I find that a success. I said that I was going to disappoint 108 people, and they said, well, no, at least one person will get what you're saying, so you only have to disappoint 107 people, which is a much more manageable number. So yeah, I'm an opinion journalist. I take what reporters do, and I take their news and the facts that they go out and they find and that they share with everyone, and then I try to put a spin on it, based on my own opinions and my own analysis. And yes, what I do is biased, and it's opinionated, and and a lot of people, especially right now in this political climate, a lot of people are like shouting at the news like, oh my God, it's you're the biased news, you're the opinionated news, you're the mainstream media. And I would say for the most part, most journalists are not. I certainly am. I do have an opinion, and my opinion is right. But it does lead to interesting things. I do get a lot of comments, a lot of fan mail. This is one of my favorites. You are the biased media. I will give you till Friday, WCPO, to fire Kevin necessary. If you do not, I will be watching Local 12. Tanya O'Rourke has a big bias when she covered the Trump rally in March. I know this because I was there and DVR'd your news. When I got home, she got all the facts wrong. Now you put out this cartoon. You are the biased media. If you don't fire, in all capital words, him, you lose a viewer. I don't want a retraction, I want him publicly fired. I will also boycott your sponsors. I keep this hanging up in, next to my desk. And for about 2 weeks after, someone found this app that every time he would shake his phone, you would hear that bell ringing, and they would say shame, just like in Game of Thrones. Yeah, kind of love it. But people complain about the news being biased and editorial cartoons being biased and me being biased, as if it's a new thing, and it's really not. So everyone's seen this on a truck somewhere in Kentucky, right? Does anyone know where this came from?
Wasn't it New Hampshire's flag at the point?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was from the Revolutionary War. This was actually used by the Marines at some point, when they first started. But it was based off of this. And this is a cartoon from, I believe, 1754. And it was trying to get the colonies to rally around Great Britain and to fight the French and to say, we are loyal citizens of the crown, and if not, you suck. And it was drawn by this guy. He was one of our first editorial cartoonists. And so, this is a very old profession, but there aren't that many people in this profession. There are maybe 40 editorial cartoonists working full-time in the United States, maybe 100 working total, as freelance. So what I have is, this is an extraordinarily rare job, and I'm super lucky that I just get to spout my opinions at all of you. And again, remember, I'm right. But I remember, when I was a kid, wee little necessary, and I would go and I would talk to other editorial cartoonists, and I would ask them, how do I become an editorial cartoonist? And they all told me, you don't. And what's extraordinary is Cincinnati has this history, this great history of editorial cartoonists. There was a guy named Jim Borgman who was at the Enquirer. I used to sneak up into his office all the time as a kid. I would bug him, and he would tell me things. He would tell me this one thing, that it's so rare to become an editorial cartoonist because there's so few of us, and he would always liken it to to a certain profession. So this is kind of like the anatomy of a cartoonist. And even though I am just the model of I was always told as a kid that I would have a better shot being a pro football player than becoming an editorial cartoonist because there are so few of us. So that I grew up to actually become an editorial cartoonist and that I'm doing it here in my hometown and following in the footsteps of my heroes is pretty extraordinary. So let's go back to moments. And so why do I say that I capture moments? Like I said, the news is happening all the time. And there's something always going on, and especially now. I mean, and just in this day and age with 24-hour or actually second by second news cycles, there's always something crazy going on, and I'm trying to find what I can do to make the news kind of palatable for you guys. I try to reflect the news kind of through my own eyes, and try to break down what is actually happening. Now, there are some people who have my job who only focus on politics, and that's why you hear a lot of people say, political cartoonist. I tend to consider myself more an editorial cartoonist, but I do a lot of politics, just because that's what's happening in the world. So, this one guy has kind of been a godsend. It's kind of been a lot of fun. But yeah, I get to focus on politics and shine some light analysis of politics, just through my eyes and through my kind of really base, stupid understanding of what's going on. And I try to do things that sometimes have a point, or I try to do things that are talking about a moment, or just trying to say this is something that is happening and that is important and that we should commemorate this. It's like I'm trying to capture history as it happens. But I don't always do politics, and that's why I say I'm an editorial cartoonist. I try to do do events and do things that happen in our lives. Sometimes it's just capturing a zeitgeist with what's happening. I really like this so much at all. I did a lot of Harambe cartoons last year. And one of the great things about living in this town is it's so weird and so funny, and so I get to do things that reflect Cincinnati. And then I have cartoons that are just trying to capture an emotion and capture something that that will give some sort of representation for events where maybe words just aren't enough. So this happened during the the France terrorist attack back in late 2015. I do that in about 30 minutes coming from a bar, but so it's I get to do things that maybe have some impact, and that maybe can I don't know, give some sort of like I said, some sort of representation of an event or a moment in time that maybe you really can't you can't describe in words, and that's special. And Jeremy was talking about how I sort of inundate myself from the emotions. Well, honestly, I don't. I have to get emotional. I have to be emotional to do what I do. Sometimes I get too emotional, and my wife has to take away my phone and cut me off from news and sit me down. And I have to watch cartoons for a bit. So like I said, I have I do about 3 cartoons a week. That's kind of my average. Some weeks I do 6. Some days, like this week, I've done 2. It's depending on the projects that I'm working on, outside of the cartoons. But usually it's an average of 3. And because I'm always looking at the news and I'm always drawing and I'm always putting out a product, that means I have a really sped up creative process. And so like, how many people here like work on projects that take like weeks and months? Wow, I would be so friggin' nervous and anxious. I would never get anything done. I would just procrastinate until like the last moment, if I had stuff like that. I usually get a day or a few hours at best. And that's like my time from concept to putting something out. But it really works well for me. And I have to think on my feet. I have to be reacting, and I really can't second guess myself, although I do second guess myself all the time. So here's kind of a typical day. This is actually going to show you the process of the cartoon that came out yesterday, because it was it's a very good example. So it usually starts with some sort of communication with my editor. I got this message really early in the morning, and he was talking about the sale of WNKU. So I was like, okay, at least that's something that's kind of popping up in my head. So I did some sketches, and then as I was doing the sketches, nothing was really kind of percolating to the surface, and I saw that there was a story about the city having a $25 million deficit, a little bit heavier than WNKU. So I started sketching that. And I came up with a couple of different sketches here, nothing too spectacular, but eventually I settled on this sketch, which is just a representation of the city of Cincinnati flag, but I'm taking out all the stuff in the center, and now it's with scissors and budget cuts instead of juncta juvis or whatever it is. And I went home, I started drawing. I got halfway through the finished drawing when I had a much better idea. And I quickly sketched that out. And this is at like 6 o'clock in the evening. Sent it off to my editor. He was like, "This is great." And so I scrapped everything that I was doing and did a brand new cartoon. So that's kind of my creative process. And like in the old days, you would have your newspaper, you would have your evening news, and that's really all the news that you would get. And you were able to like sit and kind of think about the news, as it unfolded over the day, and you weren't just bombarded by news stories. You weren't getting push alerts. You weren't checking Twitter. And it seems like now, like, news is happening all the time, and it's just coming at you at a breakneck speed, and there's always some crazy shit happening on Twitter because some weirdo decides in the middle of a meeting that is really important that he needs to start tweeting about crazy stuff, and I can't keep up with what's actually going on. This really is my life. I had this cartoon sent to me so many times last year. But yeah, this is my life. But I will say, even though it's exhausting, it really has helped me as an artist. Like, working at this pace has really helped me become a better artist and become a better creative. So, like, almost all of you, I have worked on projects that have lasted for weeks and months, and and you get a little bit of time when that's over to hopefully sit back, reflect, have some pride about the work that you've done. I don't really have that luxury. I have to go and I have to, as soon as I put a cartoon to bed, I have to start thinking about the next cartoon. And when I was, doing art for myself and trying to establish myself professionally, I was very precious about my art. I was very precious about my work, and I can't, I can't even describe just how scared I was to put my work out into the world. I really stunted myself because I would hold on to it and I would say, you know, this may be good, but it may not be good. And I was afraid of opening myself up to criticism. And I had to get over that, and I had to find a way to, you know, put my art out there with really no judgment on myself, and, you know, really not caring about judgment that people put on, you know, onto me. You know, and, you know, I discovered that, you know, the less precious I considered my artwork, the better, the more stuff that I actually put out, the more work that I was creating. And I was more excited to create my work because I stopped thinking about like just how perfect this one thing, you know, that I just made was, and really looking forward to the next thing and the thing after that and the thing after that and the thing after that. And what I had to do was just have a completely different mindset, you know, with the way that my work was, you know, was being looked at, and whether or not my work was successful. So what really helped me was to start thinking in terms of baseball. And I am so not a like athletic or sports guy, but, you know, thinking about baseball really helped, you know, kind of crystallize, you know, what I was able to do in terms of putting out art. So when a baseball player goes up to the plate, you know, let's say a baseball player can go up to the plate, you know, 10 times, and if he gets a hit 3 out of every 10 times, that person should be a Hall of Famer, or, you know, should be a Hall of Famer, really, even if he's not in the Hall of Fame. But, you know, think about that. So, you know, that's just getting a hit. That's not getting a double or a triple or an RBI or a home run or a grand slam. That's a hit and getting to first base. And that's a success. And if you do that 3 out of 10 times, that's a success. And that means 7 out of 10 times, your project might not be good. It might just be a dud. It might, you know, just fall flat. And my God, so many of my cartoons fall flat. I never know which ones are going to be a hit. I never know which ones are going to take off. There are times when I've drawn a cartoon and I know it kind of stinks, but I've run out of time and I have to put it out there. And I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with the fact that 3 out of 10 times I'll have a hit, and 7 out of 10 times I'm just putting out work. But the important thing is I'm always stepping up to the plate. And I think, you know, that's something that, you know, everybody can relate to. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to put out something every single day. You know, think of all the things you're going to work on throughout your life. And if, you know, 3 out of every 10 projects, whether it's professional or personal or whatever, you know, are a hit, you're doing pretty good. You know, and that kind of led me to another revelation with my artwork, which is once I put it out into the wild, it's out there and I need to let it go. I need to stop worrying about how people are going to, going to receive it. I need to stop worrying about whether or not people are going to criticize it. I really just had to, you know, as I say, let it go. You know, I tried to resist the temptation of doing, you know, Elsa from Frozen, you know, but that didn't, you know, but I didn't. So, you know, one of the things that I love about my job, I mean, I love a lot of things about my job because, you know, at the end of the day, no matter how bad my day is, I get to say I spent the day drawing stupid cartoons. And, you know, I mean, you can't say anything better than that. But, you know, one of the special things about my job is that I get, you know, like I said, I get to interpret the news, I get to interpret events. And I've found that with my cartoons, I may at times have the ability to, you know, to bring an issue to light better than, you know, than you reading a story or you seeing photos or videos of something that's happening in the world. You know, with, you know, we're just bombarded with media. We're bombarded with photos, with videos. I mean, how many photos do you guys take in a day? How many videos do you guys watch in a day? And we can become sort of immune to that. We can become immune to the things that are happening in the world. And I found out that my cartoons put an extra layer in front of the news that you're receiving. So, for instance, back in 2015, there was just this rash of shootings in the city, and it was terrible. And one of the and there were like several kids that were shot during that summer. And you could see the photos of the kids. I mean, one of the ones that really affected me was this child named Kine Brew. And when I saw that she was shot, I never met the girl, but she was in Avondale. I saw that she was shot, and she went blind in an eye, and I was so enraged. Like, I mean, my wife really did have to calm me down. But think of all the things that you see. Images in Syria, or of floods, of natural disasters. We're kind of immune to that because what we're seeing are videos and photos, and those are really it's photons reflected off the actual things that are happening, captured by a camera sensor, and it's reality, and we can just kind of pass over it. So my cartoons allow people to slow down and to really take in a moment. So this was something that I did during in 2015 when you had all of these shootings, and something like this, I can get you guys to not just look at a photo of a little girl, and a ticker and maybe some images of the police. I can get you guys to slow down, to take a look at something, and I found out that by looking at a drawing, looking at an illustration, and and hopefully some of you who do illustration and design have noticed this as well. It's that added layer, because someone is looking at an event or an image or a message through your eyes and through your interpretation, and I think that really does help people slow down. In terms, and see something maybe for really what it is, and have some added layers to it, and have some emotion, added emotional weight. One of the things that I found that this doesn't just do it with editorial cartoons, but it does it with stories in general. And I work with this fantastic reporter named Lucy May, and 2 years ago she went out and she did the story, and it was a great story. It was about illegal immigrants living in Middletown, and how they live in the poverty. They live below the poverty line, but they can't really raise themselves up because they're afraid that they're going to get deported. And she had one of her photographers out there, Emily, and they took great photos. But as I was reading through that story, this photo really stuck out at me because they couldn't show faces. And it was lacking a certain emotional weight. And I went to Lucy, a few days later, and I said, I really want to do a story that is, like this story about the illegal immigrants that has some emotional weight to it, but I want to find a way to show their faces. I want to find a way to use what I do and pair it with what you do, and to create something that people around here really haven't seen, which is comics journalism, and to do a story that can make people slow down a little bit and think about some issues. And apparently she had been thinking about to do because she pitched me a story right on the spot. And so what we came up with was a story called Childhood Saved. And this was our first graphic novel that we did. It's a 50-page graphic novel that we put out on WCPO.com. And it's a real story. It's a story about a family of kids whose mother was a heroin addict, who's now actually deceased because she OD'd. And it's the story about the kids, you know, living under an abusive mother who would beat them, who would shoot up in front of them, and then who were rescued. And they were taken to their grandparents' house. And this was just a fantastic project to do. But what's great about this is that I got to be able to dive into their story. And through my cartoons, I got to be able to show you scenes that you would never see if we were just doing photos of these kids or if we were just writing a story about these kids. And because this is an interpretation, hopefully it's that, that added layer is going to make you slow down a little bit and think about the issues. Think about what it must be like being a child who is living with a mom who is an addict, or what it must be like going through the system of child services, and what it's like going through an adoption. And I got to say, this is one of the best projects that I've ever worked on, and it actually led to really one of the best days of my career, because I got an email saying that the kids were finally being adopted, and I was invited to the adoption. So we went down to the courtroom, and I saw these kids with their grandparents and with their caseworkers, and everybody was just dressed up, and I saw a family really come together. And I just went as a guest, but of course I brought my sketchbook, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just I just begin sketching, and I realize that I'm witnessing just a fantastic moment. And so that came out, and that ended up being the the epilogue. So we published a new mini graphic novel of the actual day that they were adopted. And I would never have had this had it not been for for my cartooning. And I can't even begin to to tell you how special this was, because I really got to capture a moment in time. And it's kind of the best thing in the world. So I'm like open for questions if anyone wants to ask me questions. Anything. Yeah.
It's a common thing to perceive editorial cartoonists as being very cynical and jaded people, because obviously you're always putting your opinion out there, and it is frequently critical just from the nature of the work that you do. And I remember I was flipping through a book of Jim Boardman cartoons and saw one of his early drawings of Pete Rose, when Pete Rose was very early on in his career, and saying that despite what a lot of people think, that editorial cartoonists don't actually get a thrill when prominent people fall or fail or whatever. I'm just curious how you resist the urge to sort of become jaded with the constant exposure, assuming that you do.
Lots of beer. That's no, I can become jaded, but you're absolutely right, and I actually know what you're talking about, because I have that book too. No, I want everyone to succeed. I want our our government to succeed. I want our cities to succeed. I want our public figures to succeed. And yeah, it's terrible when they don't. And I'm trying to use my job and use my platform to hopefully just tell people, no, you need to be the best versions of yourself possible. It is very hard not to get jaded, because you do tend to see and react to the worst in things. But you have to come at this from a point of hope, from a point of maybe things will get better. I'm going to steal a phrase from Borgman. He called himself a barking dog, and that's what I try to do. I try to be a barking dog. I try to just alert people to the fact that sometimes people aren't being their best. Yeah.
Is there something in your childhood that sparked you wanting to have that, I don't want to say judgment, but to have sort of political view
Well, I started doing this, for my high school newspaper, and I was really being the cartoonist just because I like drawing, but I wasn't as good a drawer as I thought I should be. I was like, oh, cartoonists, they just scribble a few lines, and that's great. And I never thought I'd have to learn about perspective or things like that. And wow, I use a lot of perspective, and I'm kind of anal about it. But I really didn't have any kind of political opinion at the start. I started doing this in my high school during this magical time when the school board started to ban books and things like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and other books that I think people should be reading, but are considered controversial, and that actually really began to solidify some political ideology, if you want to call it that. And I got to I learned to be outspoken through my artwork. So that was the sort of the defining moment, I think.
It seems like your work, because it's in the moment, it can be a little ephemeral. Can you think of something that you've done that is more timeless, or one that you say, yeah, that is going to kind of last, that you can look back on and say, oh yeah, this one's kind of continues to be relevant, or has timeless kind of.
That's a very good question. I sometimes cartoons that I do where I look at this work as timeless. Some cartoons that I do will find new life on Twitter like months after. I would say that the one I did with 3 kids, a white male kid, a black male kid, and then a young female, that resonated quite a bit for months after the election, and hopefully that will come up again at some point in 4 years or so. Some pieces I've done on heroin addiction have been have had some long legs. I don't know if anything is going to ever be timeless. I don't know. Honestly, I never really think about it because, like I said, I'm always moving on to the next one.
So you've mentioned we've talked a little bit about getting too jaded, but I guess on the flip side of that, I sometimes think the most masochistic thing I can do is read the comments on any sort of newspaper section, and I do it, and maybe for 2 hours afterwards, I'm like, what did I just do to myself? Do you ever? I mean, you've got that one comment, but do you read the comments on your work?
No.
How do you okay.
I do not.
Yeah.
So.
How do you keep yourself from reading them? Because if it was me, I would want to know what people were saying, but then. Sorry, it's a complicated question.
No, actually, it's not, because everyone does ask whether I read the comments, and if you go to Facebook, oh my God, there are some gems. So. I did cartooning a little bit before the age of social media, at some of the other newspapers where I was at. So, occasionally I would get a letter from someone, or I would get, an in-person visit. One of the best was, a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law who were both running for mayor, and they both came into my office to complain that I was unfair to each of them. It was really weird. So, yeah, when I started doing this again full time, I had all the, I would go on Facebook, and yes, I would read the comments, and I would get, I still do get nasty messages and emails sent to me all the time. But boy, it was just dragging me down, and I didn't have any way of dealing with it because it had never happened to me before. So I wrote to this guy named Clay Bennett, who is a cartoonist down in Tennessee, and he's a liberal in Tennessee. So, he's going to be getting a lot of, very interesting comments. And I wrote to him, and I was like, Clay, how do I deal with this? And he sent me the most fantastic, profanity-laced email back. And it boiled down to, if there are comments, don't read the comments. You know, it's just going to set you back, and that's not what's important. If people send you emails and you know there's something that you can address, you address it. But at the end of the day, never let the fucker see you sweat. And you know, I finally got to meet Clay a couple of months ago in person, and I bought him a lot of drinks for that email. So yeah, I try not to look at the comments, and when I do, I laugh them off. And you know, when I get a nasty email, I print it out and I put it up, next to my desk. So I can take one more question. Yeah.
About your 7 out of 10, strikeouts or groundouts, whatever comment. I heard that writers and comedians especially use Twitter as a testing ground for work. Now I know your work, your finished product takes a lot of time, it's really great. Have you ever considered something that's like a little faster, like just one-off concept, and tweeting it, and then seeing if it's like really interesting to people, or if it just is no retweets and it's like, oh, don't worry about it, and then now that idea is not worth pursuing.
Yeah, on occasion I do. So I mean, I will come up with anywhere from 2 to 6 or 7 sketches any given day, and some sketches I actually do love more than the drawing that I'm doing. And if I like hit on something, I'm going to be tweeting it out. I'll just take a photo of it, I'll tweet it out, and sometimes that'll even get more retweets than the cartoon I put out that day. So yeah, I do try that, and I'll try little things here and there, little snippets of sketches. So if we were to go back to like the dinosaur sketch that I did, actually I did a dinosaur sketch of Trump, probably about a year ago, and talking about something that's timeless, that's gotten so many retweets that I knew that when I finally had the moment to do it as a cartoon, I was able to put it in there. So I think we should probably be wrapping it up right around now. Thank you guys for coming out.